go ahead and get started with the presentation. First, the purpose of this event tonight is really just to help you with wildfire preparedness. We're focused on the Hood River County area, certainly is pertinent to areas adjacent like Wasco County. But our goals here are to help you prepare your home and property to reduce the risk of burning in the event of fire in your neighborhood, and help you prepare yourself and your family for wildfire and possible evacuation, understand the local emergency systems, learn from some local stories of people taking action to increase their fire preparedness in Firewise communities and other ways, and basically give you a good connection with where to find resources for assistance to help you prepare for wildfire. So that's our basic goal for tonight. Obviously, in about an hour and a half is what we've got. We're not going to get real deep, but we want to maybe establish this connection for you to follow up. I went through the beginning, the Zoom basics, and then I'm going to talk for a while about wildfire risk and how to prepare home and property, look at some of the basics of fuels reduction and home ignition zone and defensible space. And then Barbara Ayers is going to talk to us, Hood River County Emergency Management, about the basics of emergency planning and preparedness and what the county's got going and how they can help. We've got a bit of a story from Mike Renaud from the Mosier Fire, talking about an example of the Paradise Ridge Firewise community and what you can do as an example of what you can do in your community to be prepared for wildfire. And then Eric Fennell from Oregon Department of Forestry is going to talk more about local resources available to help with preparations, and we'll have a healthy Q&A discussion as well. So with that, I'm just going to go through kind of my part of this. And it starts, as a forester, as your OSU Extension forester, my main job is as a professional forester is to help people, wherever they're at in their, their journey or their work with managing trees and forests, forest health, fire preparedness in this case. So I cover a lot of bases in forestry, but when it comes to fire, looking at forests, almost all of our areas around here are some kind of forest or woodland, native woodland in the past anyway. And all of our forests in Oregon, nearly all, are fire-driven systems. And this is an example, if you're in a white oak woodland or a ponderosa pine type, it's a fairly frequent fire. It's often, historically was a low severity fire, maybe a ground fire, but really fairly frequent fire. Get into our Douglas fir forests, maybe some of our drier Doug fir forests, as you see in the Hood River Valley, grading from pine up into the more moist forests. Those forests also burn. Douglas fir is a very fire adapted species, but they typically burn a little less often, and maybe mixed severity. Sometimes it's a crown fire, really destructive. Other times it's a ground fire. When you get deeper into the wet woods, Doug fir hemlock, those forests also are driven by fire, but maybe 100 or 400 year return in some of those more moist forests. And then when they do burn, those rare conditions like we've seen with the dry east winds, that can be really high severity, which means it kills all the trees. It could be a huge crown fire with large flame lengths. And higher up in the mountains, lodgepole pine and subalpine forests also often burn, fairly long intervals at high severity. So the point is that fire is really a driver in our forest systems, and we're living amongst the woods and out in the edge of the woods. So, as an example from one of the tools we have, the Oregon Wildfire Risk Explorer, is something that I will send you all links to this. But just looking at a map of Oregon and then looking at ignitions, in the last 30 years or so, either human cause or the red dots, and lightning cause or the yellow dots. So you see, fires are starting all the time in our wooded environments, which is most of where we're living with trees in sight. But not too many of those fires become huge fires. Most of those fires are put out or stopped before they get large. But you can see from this map of the large fires over the last 30 years that certainly there are some large fires, and they're likely to come back to those forests at some point, even if it's maybe 100 years in between fires. Of course, you can see from last year's fires, the salmon colored blobs on that map. That's the terrible fires we had over our Labor Day fires. And I'll zoom in a little bit to just to the Hood River County and Wasco on the edge there, you can see again, plenty of human-caused ignitions are going on in the county, and a few of those ignitions, either human or lightning, turn into big fires like the Eagle Creek fire, some of the fires in Mosier, like the microwave fire, the Mosier Creek fire just last year, some of the bigger fires on the drier side in Wasco County. So of course we know that fire is something that's likely to come to our area, and we want to be prepared. So our goal here really is to develop a fire adapted communities, or you and your community learn to be fire adapted, meaning that you are in a fire prone area. And the goal is that all of us, community members, landowners, businesses, our agencies, that we acknowledge that we accept some responsibility for living in an area prone to wildfire, and that we take an active role in preparing for those impacts and also reducing the severity of that fire, because there's a lot we can do to make fires less destructive when they come. As I've mentioned, Amanda and I, working with OSU Extension, we have a fire program as well as our basic forestry programs. And we really ramped up our focus on being fire aware and fire prepared. So we have an extensive set of webinars that we produced over the last year, focused on all aspects of fire and fire preparedness, and before, during, and after wildfire, how to help people deal with that. And so all of these websites and resources that we talk about tonight, we're going to put them in an email and send them to you, all of you that registered. I have your emails, so you don't need to worry too much about trying to capture all these links and even the presentation. The presentation is recorded, so you can watch it again and tell your friends and neighbors to tune in. And also then we'll send you all these resources in an email so that you can go to these websites. In addition to the webinar series I was talking about, we have a comprehensive fire program website at Oregon State University. A lot of resources about preparing for wildfire, what you do during a fire and after a fire. And of course, our other speakers tonight are going to have other connections. There's a real partnership, with Oregon Department of Forestry and with emergency management, Oregon State Fire Marshals, all of the different agencies that get involved in trying to help us understand and prepare for fire. So kind of the basics here, key thing to understand is that our buildings are fuel. And in fact, they're very flammable fuel. They're much more concentrated fuel than the forest itself. So once a house catches on fire, the heat and the potential for that fire to spread is pretty intense. And however the fire got to your neighborhood, once it is in the neighborhood, maybe going house to house, a lot of the aspects of what you can do to prepare are what you do to make your house less likely to catch fire. So why is one house burning and the other isn't? And sometimes it has to do with the details of their preparation. So when you look at how homes catch on fire, when a wildfire is in the area, the first exposure is from embers or firebrands that are blowing in the wind. And of course, the thing that drives fire is the weather, the dry weather, the hot weather, and the wind, of course, which makes fire spread much faster. So embers in the wind, direct flame contact, if you have, something flammable right next to your house that catches fire, such as a tree or a shrub, that obviously could catch your house on fire. And also even the radiant heat, if, it's really a hot fire and it can start heating up to combustion on your siding or something like that. But by far, the most common way that houses catch on fire is not from direct heat or flame, but is from embers, firebrands that get something on the house or near the house burning, land on the building or enter the building through, windows or through screens, or catch the leaves and things in the gutters or in the corners of the base of the house, and that's what gets the house burning. So a lot of what we really want to do is focus on the home itself and its immediate surrounding, just the first few feet, to reduce the likelihood that firebrands are going to catch a house on fire. I was traveling and visiting with landowners that affected by fire, obviously last year being such a terrible year. And in my counties, Clackamas and Marion County, many homes burn, and obviously thousands of acres, hundreds of thousands of acres of forest. Here's an example of a home in the Santiam area, the Beachy Creek fire. And, it was surrounded by pretty low green vegetation, and the forest was about, 90 feet away, but that home caught on fire. Well, here's one just 100 feet away from that house that didn't. Had the same kind of surrounding of a very intense fire in the woods. This home did not burn. And I wasn't the investigator. I don't know exactly the reason, but it's an example that there are some big differences we can make just in terms of what makes one home vulnerable to embers and firebrands, and what makes another home more resistant to those. As an example, in that same neighborhood, just a quarter-mile away, someone had built this home fairly recently, and they took pains and studied how do you build a house in a fire-prone area that is less likely to catch on fire. So the entire forest around them burned catastrophically, and their fairly new home and landscape, the landscape burned, but it was a low fuels landscape, and the home was resistant to embers that were showering this home. There were 50-mile-an-hour winds blowing embers around this home, and it did not burn. So that's just an example of, the importance of paying attention to what you can do around the buildings themselves. Some of the basics of what we call defensible space and the home ignition zone, defining defensible space, you probably all heard that term, but it's basically the area, around the home and the home itself, where its fuels and hazards have been managed such that professional firefighters can effectively and safely defend that home, that they don't have to come and do a lot of prep work just to make it even safe to be there. It's already ready for them to move in if they can to help defend the home. It's the zone around that place, that house, or that building where your practices can improve the home's defense against flames and heat. And if it's well managed, then it's likely a defensible space. And we look at the first zone, which is the first 30 feet from any of the structures or attachments to the structures. And the basics there are first the home itself, fire resistant materials, again, things that protect against embers. And so a lot of that has to do with your summarizing the house and cleaning up all the leaves and things that might be flammable every year before fire season, but also the construction, of course, of the home being more fire resistant, non-flammable roof, double pane windows, things that keep embers from intruding, like screening your vents and soffits, and again, regular cleaning of debris from near the home or the gutters or the roof. And you start looking at what you do in that extra, that landscape near your home, fire resistant plants, low growing, not the resinous oily plants, like no junipers or cedars or really flammable plants. If you have grass, keep it mowed or keep it green. Prune trees up, 6-10 feet off the ground. Have your trees spaced out, especially the conifers that are more flammable. Keeping trees not from overhanging the house. Within the first 5 feet, especially having non-flammable landscaping materials or high moisture content plants. Removing that dead vegetation, removing any firewood stacks or propane tanks within the zone, making sure that they're not close enough to catch the house on fire. And then just keeping things watered if you can in that first 30 feet, because that's where the real distance in terms of actual flames and heat, 30 feet is real critical. And that's where you can keep that threat pretty much down by doing those things. And again, all of these things are really well laid out in the materials and handouts. You're going to kind of want to study this and do an assessment of your situation. But as I review them here, I'll just move out to the next zone. When you get past 30 feet, we're not talking about a moonscape. We're talking about strategically managing your trees and shrubs and vegetation, spacing them out or having them clustered. Deciduous trees, especially higher moisture content, less flammable than conifers. And some of the more flammable conifers are juniper, cedars, and cypress. Understanding what those are. And then also, fuel breaks, sidewalks, driveways, walkways, et cetera, are part of that kind of defensible space and the 30 to 100 foot zone. And again, pruning trees up, disconnecting the tops of trees from the ground fuels or ladder fuels. And you got even further out, if you have a big enough lot or out in the woods, then you're maybe a little less intensive management. but you're still looking at separating the fuels or clumping it, not having continuous fuels, disconnecting the ground fuel from the trees, removing heavy debris, removing a lot of the dead wood. So this is a more intensive management in your home landscape than you might be able to do in the back 40 acres, for instance. And separating crowns so they're not touching each other as much. And again, this is a pretty quick tour of these kinds of things, but when you really start looking at these and systematically looking at your landscape, of course, you can go back to the book and have a cheat sheet. So when you're looking at your home landscape or your woodlands, the objective is really based on reducing fuels and reducing the connection of the fuel so that fire can't really build up and race through it. So we're just trying to change fire behavior. So fire is coming, it's going to burn through the vegetation, but you can really change how it burns by, again, changing the way the fuels are and making them obviously less heavy fuels, reduce the amount and reduce the connection between fuels. And again, making it easier for firefighters to get in there, reducing the damage, having a low intensity fire instead of high intensity to make your property, less inviting to fire and more inviting to firefighters. And so when you look at, a woodland or the woody vegetation, you want to avoid the fire being able to get from the ground up into the trees, especially when you think about wind-driven fire. Having lower ground fuel and fewer ladder fuels is key. And you do that just by, again, reducing that continuity of fuel, breaking up the continuity. So clumps of trees or clumps of things that might flare out, aren't the worst case, as long as they're separated. And horizontal continuity would be from the tree crown to tree crown or shrub to shrub. And just, again, reduce the amount of fuel because that's going to reduce the heat and the spread of fire. So on the surface horizontally or that vertical connection to the crowns, the canopy. So if you look at an example of an overgrown, woodland with lots of shrubs, obviously if fire came through here, it would have a lot to burn and it's very continuous and could really pick up a head of steam. And that same woodland, if you were to thin it out, reduce the ground fuels, keep the larger trees that are more fire resistant, have thicker bark, and again, don't have foliage near the ground, increase the height, up to the crown so that fire doesn't connect between the ground and the canopy, and separate the density of crowns. So those are the basics, of a woodland or home landscape fuels reduction approach. And it will change the way fire behaves when it gets to this part of your property. And so this is a comparison, that example before and after. There's something, of course, that would require maintenance. And if you're in a drier forest, it doesn't grow as fast. But if you're in a nice, moist, productive forest, you may have to be maintaining it, every couple of years and making it maybe easier to mow or other kinds of maintenance. So to do this for yourself, for your property, again, there's a variety of resources. Just the basic of starting with an assessment of walking around your property. If you can, get a professional to help you out, but you can do this with your own checklist and just the basics of taking the home ignition zone checklist and assess all these details about your home, and the property itself, your vulnerability, with ember showers around the house or the vegetation guidelines for managing the vegetation around the house. So this is an example of a publication. We'll send you a link to this. One of several good resources that gives you that home assessment guide to do that. And then, of course, once you've done that, we'll talk, some of our other speakers will talk about actually getting the work done and maybe assistance in doing the work. It's all well and good to make a list of things you want to do and know exactly what you should do. Then the matter of getting it done, of course, is another thing, and it takes time and money perhaps, but it's a long-term process. So getting started now would be good, and being ready when there's more sources of assistance when the time comes. So with that, that's just my brief run through of those things. And again, just want to make sure you're connected with the resources, get in touch with me, utilize the web resources and such that I referred to. But from here, let's see, do we have a bunch of questions, Amanda?
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. If you want to answer them, I can go ahead and tell you what they are.
Well, I have a couple of minutes and then I'm going to turn it over to Barb. So why don't you pick maybe one of the more the burning questions.
Okay. Yeah, so Dale Hill asks, with fires being inevitable and most of the focus tonight on preparation on fires that have already started and threatening, especially in the WUI, the wildland urban interface, what can be done on a forest landscape level to reduce the probability of fires and also to reduce the severity of the fires that do occur?
Okay, so two things. As far as the probability, so one of the big factors in the probability of fire is the probability of an ignition. And as you saw in my first slide, most of our ignitions are human cause. So the number one thing we can do is if we can do anything to reduce the amount of accidental human caused ignitions, that's going to be the big one for reducing probability of fire. Of course, there's lightning fires in the mountains, and then under the extreme weather, it can come out of the mountains, and that's a different story. But the other part is to reduce the severity. And so the basics, what I just talked about for the home landscape, if you could do that deeper in the woods, just reducing the amount of fuels, all those principles of reducing the ground fuel and the connection of the ground fuel to the canopy and having fuel breaks, all those things work at a landscape level. Now, the challenge is on the west side or in more productive moist forests, the growth rate is so high, there's so much fuel growing, the natural fire regime is this very destructive fire that's every 100, 200 years, as we've seen. And so it's kind of hard to change that west side landscape. So we generally focus more on strategic boundaries with high value resources in our communities. And we get deeper in the woods, we're looking at big fire breaks, roads, highways, or strategically managed areas. On the east side, which we have both in Hood River County, we have both drier eastern forests, east side type forests, and we have a more moist mountain forests. Then that kind of fuels reduction, it's naturally a low severity fire, infrequent, and you can manage your landscape to be the same. So if you're in a drier pine or oak forest type, setting it up so that you can, what used to happen is it burned every 5, 10 years and it would keep fuels low. And if you can't burn, then you substitute that with your own mowing or manual fuels reduction. Of course, we're also talking about bringing prescribed fire back and burning under controlled conditions to reduce fuels, which would be a natural type of thing to drive a pine or an oak forest, a little more artificial in a moist Doug fir forest. So I think I'll leave it at that one because we're going to have a lot more time for Q&A, and I think our other speakers can answer a lot of questions. Really glad that we have the Mojer Fire mic here because a lot of the questions might be pertinent to you as well. So with that, I'd like Barb maybe to pick up from here and talk a bit more about Hood River emergency management and what people can do to prepare in the case of fire.
Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, yeah, go ahead and start your slideshow.
Okay. Okay, so thanks, Glenn. That was really a great presentation. I'm here from Hood River County to talk to you a little bit about what our county and your county, if you don't live here, does in emergencies, how we prepare in advance, how we work with our partners, and what you can do to help prepare yourself and your family. We all know we've had quite a few incidents in the last few years. The guy before me, yeah. I keep wanting to call him and going, hey, what just happened? We're currently in a drought emergency, of course. We've had a number of fires. Those are fairly routine out here in the gorge. We had a couple really bad winter storms. Biggest one was, of course, in 2017. And then, of course, in the last couple of years, we've had a round of COVID. I think my most important message, if I can, for you is to make sure you're aware this could happen at any time. We all need to be thinking about what if I'm traveling, what if I'm at the grocery store, what if I'm at work and something happens. The Eagle Creek fire, for example, happened just like 6 months after that big winter storm. The local businesses in the community were barely recovering and kind of got hit with another big incident. And right in the middle of it, we had we did this Oregon total solar eclipse drill. So it was just kind of a crazy year. We have all of these types of things. So any preparedness you do to get ready for fires or power outages will benefit you on any of these other emergencies. It's all the same stuff, all hazards, planning, and emergency response. So here at the county, of course, we have a number of plans. We have an emergency operations plan. We have a lot of mutual aid agreements. We have a continuity of operations plan. The upper left there is the NHMP, Natural Hazards Mitigation Plan. And I saw that, by the way, before I forget, a number of you on this call, thank you, our colleagues that have either worked on any of these plans or in emergency response to us, in particular, OSU Extension, ODF, I see U.S. Forest Service on the call. I have a number of county colleagues on this call, DHS, Mosier Fire District, and Aries. So thank you all. Basically, the county plans look at what do we do in a large scale emergency, you know, when things are getting overwhelmed, when we're running out of resources. And it considers not just one agency, but across agencies and jurisdictions. So there's a number of different steps. That first step, of course, is probably 911, getting the calls or sending out emergency alerts to you if something has happened. And then the EOC opens, Emergency Operations Center. That's the world I live in. And we start to work on stuff also in life safety. Play number 2 there is, of course, first responders in the field. So, and then it goes, in emergency management, there's 4 phases, and you go all the way to the end, which is the recovery phase. So we do preparedness outreach pretty much year round. Of course, during COVID, we kind of all scaled back. We'll be at Families in the Park again tomorrow night. We're thrilled to have Glenn invite us to this today. You can see the big one, and we do a number of outreach events. Also, across all the jurisdictions here, we do drills. Down on that lower left was we got a large federal grant to bring FEMA to town, and we did what's called IEMC, Integrated Emergency Response. And the upper right there, you'll see Cascadia Rising drills, so earthquake drills, relocation of 911, and so on and so forth. But all the drills and all the plans really can, you know, there's nothing like the real thing. And unfortunately here in our county, we faced several real things. So most notably Labor Day weekend, 2017, and everybody's thinking, woohoo, it's Labor Day weekend. Well, my cell phone rang at 3 a.m. and it's Matt English, which is never a good sign when your county sheriff is calling at 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And it started out with these hikers, 150 new hikers in the woods that went in the Eagle Creek Trail. And so that's my plug there, lower right there, for being recreation ready. So being prepared for disasters and emergencies, you're also thinking about that when you're out hiking or you're paddling on the water, whatever you're doing in your life, you always want to have that in the back of your mind if you're traveling, etc. That phone call at 3 a.m. turned into a 1-month EOC full-time activation. And of course, was the #1 fire in the country at the time. And there was a large incident command in the field. Usually in that particular case, it was U.S. Forest Service, and it had Oregon State Fire Marshal, ODF, also local fire response, and then of course the sheriff. So sheriffs are usually in charge of evacuation, so they kind of play a key role in this. And you can see the lower right, there was the folks getting reunited after that incredible hike. Hats off to the people that helped with that incredible search and rescue mission. So we've had some we had a big year, started in December of 2016. We had extended snow, went into ice. We had to declare what's called a presidential emergency. That means it rises to the level of way beyond county overwhelmed and state overwhelmed. It rose to the level of federal emergency. So did this little number here. And so when these things come up, they last for an awfully long time. And whatever we can do to be more prepared, more responsive, more resilient is better in the long run. We come out of it faster. Here's another little case in point. I'm sorry, Chief Renault. I know this is your hood. I live in Mosier. I was standing in the Hood River 911 Center midday in June, just stopped in to say hi. And I heard the radio call go out, said Mosier, derailment, wildfire, possible explosions. I literally heard it real time. And as luck would have it, because of that, I was the last person on the freeway to get out there to evacuate my animals before the freeway shut down. So who knew something like this could happen? We need to be thinking about, you know, how are we prepared? How is our family? What if we're separated, and all those things? Now, this is one of the things that I worry probably about the most. We're very constrained here in the gorge as far as transportation corridors. We have very small, antiquated bridges that can't hold a lot of weight. They can't handle the stress of a large evacuation. We have 84 is 2 lanes one way. We have that little dinky Highway 30 on the Oregon side and that little dinky 2-lane Highway 14 on the Washington side. But look at those numbers. Unbelievable amount of not only commuters and tourists, there's state and frankly, national and international stuff driving on our roads every day, and semi trucks, and also right along the river there on BNSF and UP Railway. So here's a personal story from Mosier back in 2009. I was up at midnight only because I was going to do the Hood to Coast race that morning, and just happened to, by the way, these are my kids, fast asleep, not a creature was stirring. I looked out the front window and saw that. This is the microwave fire of 2009. And immediately there were evacuation orders going into place. The power was out right away. So these, you know, it's really hard to pack up your car in the middle of the night when it's pitch black. And, you know, I'll tell you more about my experience as we go. These were some of the neighbors in Mosier. This guy is obviously packing to get out of there quickly. The helicopters were overhead. My question to you is, what's wrong with this picture? Whoops, let me go back. Whoops, I went the wrong way, sorry. What's wrong with that picture? I'm sure Mike and folks in the fire service will tell you, you know, you really only want to take, you know, maybe 5 or 6 things that you absolutely can't replace. You do not want to spend your time getting stuff out of your house that you can replace. You really only want heartbeats and memories, things that you cannot replace. So my lessons learned in that is, on my little road, there's only 4 houses, and all 4 houses had a different reaction to the exact same emergency at 2 a.m. in the morning. I immediately started packing my car. And if you start early, then you're ready to help your neighbors later. I started thinking about, are there hazards nearby? We have a surf shop out there, out here in Mosier. And, you know, it has fiberglass, you know, and that kind of thing. Smoke was intense from this fire, and I was really worried about my neighbor that's elderly who wasn't going to go anywhere. And as it turned out, she also had a hearing problem. So she wasn't really hearing things and wasn't really aware that we were at risk. So you really want to get on these things quickly if you can. A big challenge is power is often out in these fires. So how do you get info? Don't forget about your car radio, or charging your phones in your car. What are you going to do to be able to see? Those headlamps are great. Now I have headlamps and lanterns right inside the front door and in every room of my house. So you're kind of ready to roll. Do you know how to shut off your gas and water if you need to? And then you really need that evacuation list, even if it's just the top 5 things. In fact, I started a crate that already has sort of my top 5 things in it. And it's there year round, and it has a list of the other 3 things to grab. You really don't have a lot of time in these situations. One of the big problems, we've seen this in all of these, the fires and the derailment, and if we had a quake, you know, it happens really fast. There's limited communication, so you're not getting good real-time information. You might get information from your neighbors, or somebody might text you. It's really hard in these situations to get good information. So you really want to stay on top of hearing official notifications from your county, from your sheriff, from your police, and your fire agencies. So the 3 steps, of course: get a kit, make a plan, stay informed. Lauren Kramer there teaches this every day too. You know, this is basic preparedness for families. You've really got to be doing it, folks. Make a family go kit, have a family disaster plan, practice and maintain it. And then make sure that you stay informed by opting into Citizen Alert. And that's in every county across the US. So you can opt in there and you'll get official notifications. It's not PR stuff, it's emergency evacuation notifications and such like that. So what's in your Go Kit? Of course, nowadays, the recommendation here in Oregon is we need 2 weeks of food and water and supplies. And my advice is get something on wheels if you can, because that thing's pretty heavy. And the biggest challenge, of course, is water. Oh, luckily here in Oregon, we have a lot of water. So if you have a good filter and some storage, you might have some options there. So here's your basic supplies. There's lots of great checklists out there at ready.gov. We also have a website called getreadygorge.com. And, you know, basic supplies, you're going to want battery powered radios, backup batteries, tools, all that fun stuff. And then my message to you is this: if you're a camper, you're 90% there. So this is not a new initiative. You're just going to go leverage your existing camping kit to advantage, and you're golden. Moms that take kids out for the weekend down to the beach, or if you go travel out of town, you know, you're thinking you're a prepper. So use that to your advantage. And how about this number? You are set. If you have any kind of an RV, that's your automatic evacuation center. What we saw in the Eagle Creek fire at our shelter in Skamania County was, it was a 3-part shelter. There was a traditional shelter for people that didn't have a place to go, that were in a Red Cross shelter. Adjacent to it on the fairgrounds, you could roll up your trailer, your motorhome, or your tent. So you had some personal space. It's really kind of nice to have your own little space like that. And then the 3rd part, there was an animal shelter adjacent. So if you didn't have room, or if you were in that traditional shelter, your animals were right nearby and you could keep an eye on them. So again, anything you do when you're out and about, whether you're in the snow or the water or the forest, you're always thinking about being prepared. And the same goes true for being prepared for emergencies. There's your 3 things: get a kit, make a plan, stay informed. So a cargo kit is pretty helpful. I find that this can help you if you're at work or if you're on the road. Just leave it in there year round. And of course, it's going to change in the winter. You're going to heavy up on those blankets, but you always want to make sure there's water and some food items in there. There's some really great templates for a family emergency plan. Here's one from FEMA at ready.gov. Really helpful. We also hand out these neat little packets if you come to Families in the Park tomorrow, or if you go to any of our events. They have a good little checklist in there and a template for a family emergency plan. It's pretty much everybody in the family needs to know what to do and have a backup plan, because you just have to understand and expect that you're going to be separated. And you also, emergency services may be overwhelmed. Those roads and bridges are going to be challenging. It's going to be hard to get around. You might have to shelter in place, and you may be on your own for 2 to 3 weeks. So really think about those kids, think about family members, particularly elderly, and think about what needs to be in that family plan. And let's assign some responsibilities. Let's get the kids involved. I'm a big believer. You get the kids on this project and it'll happen. They will make parents get on board. So folks with health challenges or elderly really need extra attention. They need extra clothes. They get colder and hotter. Of course, they have more special needs, special health information. They may need, you know, catheters, oxygen. What if their caregiver can't get to them? So we need to be thinking about alternative plans for how we can help them. One of the lessons I learned in an evacuation is the seniors will not want to leave. They either don't want to leave their home or they might not have a ride. So I ended up evacuating a couple seniors, one that was just going to hole up at home and one that didn't have a ride. Everybody else in the complex had left and he was there by himself. So make sure you're checking around in your neighborhood to see if there's anybody that might need some help. So, you know, just a little fun kind of now what game. This is basically a family disaster drill. You just heard that there's a major wildfire heading this way. Roads are starting to close and the power just went out. And oftentimes in these situations, water is also out because there's a boil water notice or there are challenges getting enough water pressure. So, you know, your horses may be at home, you may be at work, you know, and the kids may be in school. So what are you going to do about it? course, we had an absolutely awful year last year here in Oregon. So we all know it could happen at any time. This particular year, we're all just on super edge because everything's so dry and we feel at such wildfire risk this season. And after that sobering year we had last year in Oregon. So here's your number 3, stay informed. So the best advice I can give you is make sure you get signed into Citizen Alert. We have it here in Hood River County. All of the fire, police, sheriff agencies, 911, anybody that's a first responder, all has the same system. Also in Wasco County, where Mosier is, they have it, and in counties across the country. So, you know, you can sign up for your home address and your work address. So for example, I signed up in Hood River for my work address and I signed up in Mosier for my home address, so at Wasco County. And you could do that for your family members or your business. So you really want to try to get signed up as many different addresses as you want to. If you opt in, you can add your cell phone numbers and email, and you can say, do this first, do this second, do this third. And nowadays we also have text to 911. So that's a great new piece of the equation. So again, these are those emergency alerts. What kind of information might you get in something like this? It's going to likely be something like this. Get ready, be set, or go. So these are evacuation orders, and it's always hard to remember, you know, be ready is that's obvious, but what about if your sheriff sends you an emergency alert that says your level 2 evacuation order is for your road? So, you know, it's pretty important to know level 2, be set, level 3, go now. So be ready. So when you first get that evacuation order, or if anybody in your area or nearby, or you're downwind from some hazard like a fire, you're going to want to start to pack right away. And even if you don't go, you're ready, and your stress level will come down. You'll be in much better circumstances. You'll be able to help your neighbor. So here's an example in Chief Renault's hometown, or my hometown, and his jurisdiction. This was just last year, the Mosier Creek fire. You can see there, so see green, yellow, red. There's your green, yellow, red. That's get ready, get set, and go. So red is go. Those people were evacuated immediately. Yellow was be ready on a moment's notice. So those people had to be packed and ready to roll. Everything's sitting in their car or it's out front, ready to go. And then the minute you're on the green, you're starting to think about packing up so that you're not stressing when you're in get set mode. So there's the picture on the left is just overlooking the very early hours of that Mosier Creek fire, very fast moving and right there in a residential area. Here's our friend Sasquatch. He's big on ready, set, go. And here was Hood River County has an evacuation plan. We actually have one of the first in the state of Oregon. We crafted it basically on the fly in the Eagle Creek fire. And you can see those zones there, A4, A5, and A6. So we came up with trigger lines and have different neighborhoods broken into zones, so we could kind of articulate A5, you're ready, or you're set, or you're go. So you can see there, of course, Cascade Locks was evacuated almost immediately, and all of Hood River's west side was in be ready mode. So they were in level 2, and then green was really close to downtown, and that was ready to roll if things escalated. One of the other things we did in the Eagle Creek fire that was one of the first that was done in Oregon, there was an awful lot of planning done by this great group of people in the EOC on the ESF8 desk, so the medical desk and mass care. They really looked at where are fragile and vulnerable people. We were really worried that they needed extra time and they needed extra attention. They might have needed transportation. They needed somebody to knock on their door, not just count on them getting a notification from Citizen Alert. So this really helped us understand, where to concentrate that type of effort. And so our healthcare partners and our fire agency folks and some of our deputies went out and knocked on doors in the areas we were really worried about. So who else needs more time? I can tell you from firsthand experience that animals smell that fire long before you do. I have this, what's funny now story, but wasn't funny at the time story about trying to get my cat into the bag to evacuate. So my best advice to you is the first sign of any kind of an emergency, or you think you might have to evacuate, I would immediately put animals into a small area that's easy to grab and go from. So I basically put my cat in the bathroom so that when I was ready to roll, I could get her into the bag. She still, of course, fought getting into the bag, but you know, at least she was easier to find. Otherwise, those cats just dematerialize. And you know, the dogs sense the stress, they smell it long before we do. And you're really going to want to be thinking about where you're going to take your pets. Is there a pet-friendly place to go? Do you have some crates and temporary fencing or something like that that you can use? I mentioned that I evacuated my neighbor. I was really worried she would die of smoke inhalation. So this is just another very important reason to evacuate. It may not be safe for you to breathe that air. So there's some really great lists out there of stuff to take. Again, if you work on your evacuation list, put it in that crate, have it in that grab and go situation, and have your car ready to roll. I think you'll be in a lot better spot. So please get ready early and go early. Don't hesitate, don't wait. You'll just need that extra time, and it'll help you in the long run. So when you do go, you're going to want to have maps and alternative routes. You're going to take your go kit. You're going to lock your door. You're going to leave a note on the door, not just for first responders so they know you've evacuated, but for family members and neighbors. Your preparedness helps you, your family, but it also helps your community. It really helps you be part of the solution, not part of the problem. You know, people that stay behind, we worry about them. And at a certain point, if you stayed behind and it was a mandatory evacuation, you may not get another chance to get out. So we really encourage you to go early. So what does evacuation look like? This is my animal family here. That's my cat. That great little hexagon thing was magic. It has her cat box in there and she's all set. There's Dude, my basset hound, heading over to the little dog carrier. And I went and evacuated to friends' houses. So if you can evacuate to friends or neighbors, go visit somebody, go camping, get out of the area, you'll be in a lot better spot. If you can possibly not go into the emergency shelter, I think your life will be better, and it certainly will reduce the impact of evacuations in these situations. And don't forget, other complications arise often in any kind of an emergency. Boil water notices means you can't drink the water. In the derailment for more than 3 days, actually they resumed the train service before we got water again. So part of the problem was we didn't have access to water. Also, don't forget, in these emergencies, one exit closed. That was exit 69 to Mosier, and almost the state of Oregon was in gridlock for 12 hours. So this is the problem with evacuations and fast moving incidents. So all the more reason to go early. A new wrinkle in Hood River and Mosier, unfortunately, is what's called PSPS, Public Safety Power Shutoffs. They were announced in summer of 2019 by Pacific Power here. And these are outages before a fire. So this is trying to prevent utility caused fires, and they may shut off the power to prevent it, anything that could happen in a heat wave. So I really worry about this. People aren't thinking about power outages in summer. We all think about them in winter. We know that's always possible with ice and snow and trees falling on power lines and things like that. But in summer, before a wildfire, it is possible that we could have power outages. So it's really important we're thinking about backup power, pocket, chargers, inverters, solar, all that fun stuff. And again, don't forget, in a power outage like a PSPS, some of our sewer services aren't going to work. If you're on a well, you're not going to be able to pump water, septic systems. So this is a worry. So back to the basics: get a kit, make a plan, be informed. Please opt in for Hood River County, Wasco County Citizen Alert, Clackamas, wherever you may live. Try not to do the old "I'll get around to it," because it happens more often than we realize. And I think we've seen that in recent years. Here at Hood River County, we would do anything we can to help. but sometimes it can be days or weeks before us or the state or federal government may be able to get to an area to help citizens. So it's really important that you're prepared, that you can hold down your own fort if you can possibly do that. We'll do our very best to help with shelters and such, but we really ask that you try to do your best to take care of your family as well. One of the things that keeps me not awake at night is this: we have the most amazing people in Oregon, people that care, that come together and do whatever it takes to get us through these bad situations. So hats off to Oregonians and Gorge people. They are our greatest strengths in any and all emergencies. So we're in it with you, whatever it brings. Hood River County Emergency Management, Hood River County, all of our partners, we're here for you, and we're proud to serve you. I just wanted to leave you with this last slide. This is our website, getreadygorge.com. We launched it during COVID. It had all the latest COVID information. It's got multiple tabs, as you can see on there, for businesses, had a lot of information on it. Now we've migrated it to fire, emergencies, and all hazards. So that's pretty much it for me, Glenn.
All right, thank you, Barb. That was great. That's so, especially all the true to life, your own experiences. You know, we know what that's like. And I evacuated last year and I wasn't very ready, so I'm taking this to heart. All right, well, I think we'll go on to Mike, Mosier Fire. If you just want to turn your video on, and at some point I've got some slides about Firewise, but why don't you just start out and tell us a bit about, you know, first about yourself and then what you do to help communities and that Firewise community example.
Perfect. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Renault. I'm the fire chief of Mosier Fire District over here in Mosier, Oregon. And so a couple of things about the Firewise stuff that we're going to talk about today. So when I'm out and about, I still go out to door to issue burn permits for people that do debris burning, barrel burning, and stuff like that. So a lot of things that I do while I'm out on my day-to-day rounds is I actually hand out a bunch of Firewise type information and a lot of the stuff that we looked at today of how to get your house prepared for wildfire and how to, you know, work on, you know, cleaning up the stuff, you know, cleaning up your yard, trimming up the trees, making sure that we have access. One of the things that a lot of times they don't look at is access for fire apparatus. So if I'm trying to drive down go down your driveway in my apparatus, I may or may not be able to get in or out just because of overhanging trees at the entrance of your driveway, or it may not be well marked. So those are a lot of things that we put out there when I'm out doing site visits. Along with that, as Barb alluded to, in Wasco County, we also have the Everbridge and or the reverse 911. So I'm also out handing out those cards to make sure that all my constituents and everybody that I'm in contact with day-to-day basis get that information and have it ready to go. So when we have to do evacuations in our district, we can notify all the residents. Since I've been the chief here, I've had 2 conflagration fires in my district. One the first year I was here, and then obviously one last year, which was the Mosier Creek fire. And so part of the Firewise that that they were doing up in the Paradise Ridge area was a direct response to what happened from the Mosier Creek fire. Because if you looked on Barb's, one of her maps, it actually showed Paradise Ridge was in level 1, and then just one corner of their road was actually in level 2 during the fire. So they could actually look across and actually see, you know, the flank of the fire coming towards them, along with also seeing the air show and everything else going in during that fire and during that incident. So after that, the homeowners out there got a hold of the Oregon Department of Forestry, Rick Fletcher and myself, and they were asking questions on what to do for Firewise. The good thing about out in that area, they don't necessarily have a homeowners association, but they have a road owners association or a road authority. So with that, they were able to bring the team together and come up with a plan to work on doing Firewise out in their community. Along with that, there was some other offshoot roads that also got involved with that as well. So with all the work that they did, they were able to make themselves a Firewise community. And I do believe it's one of the first ones in Wasco County and in our area currently.
Yeah, I think, Mike, I'll bring up a presentation just about what is a Firewise community. And there was a question in the chat about, how do we make ourselves Firewise? Is that available in Hood River County? So I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation that just has a little bit about it, and then you can help us, talk about it.
Sure.
So Mike, what is Firewise?
So Firewise basically is a way that residents can work on reducing their wildfire risk. And as the screen shows, there's actually a website where you can actually look up to see what it all takes to do or to become a Firewise community. Along with that, the other things you can do as you're going through it, you can also contact the Oregon Department of Forestry, your local fire districts. They have information as well to do a lot of that stuff and can come up with a lot of that information to help get you down to the road that how to set yourself up. So you need to have the homeowners to commit, and generally speaking, when they do it, they try to look at like homeowners association, or in our case, they did a road authority association to put it together. And as it says, they formed, since they were already a road authority, they already had a board and a committee. So they already had that part set up. And so really the only other thing they had to do is design where the boundary was going to go. And as I said, even though they were on the Paradise Ridge as the main portion of it, there were a couple other streets and off to the side there that weren't directly intersected with them, but they were also part of the program as well. So, so basically to plan it, so prepare your assessment. And as I said earlier, you can always obtain information from the local fire district. Then you'd submit that to the Oregon Department of Forestry, and then they will develop a plan and submit it to the NFPA. And then with that, you have to actually show that you're doing work to make your community Firewise. And in their case, they did a lot of equipment and stuff, and then worked on all the houses. So it wasn't like one person stuck at one residence. They actually come together as a team, and they may work on this residence this day, this residence the next day, maybe this field the next day. So they actually spread it out a bunch. So it's not just one person or one homeowner, hammering through it all. It's definitely a collaborative effort. And then after everything has been sent in, then NFPA makes the decision and the determination of who becomes a Firewise community. And then some of the steps, as this slide talks about, they do fuels reduction and treatments. And again, they do neighborhood events. And again, with that, they also look for grants and stuff that we can use to maybe offset the cost of a chipper, or, maybe bring in some extra volunteer help. I know at one point in time, they were looking at possibly trying to use the fire district as just some extra help to bring in for, saws and stuff like that to help do some of that mitigating. And then, so what we're really doing, and again, it goes back to the other slides that came out earlier. So when you're looking at this, these are basically the same slides and the same brochures I hand out to the residents that I communicate with, of really what we need to do to look at making your property Firewise, where to clean, how to clean, and how to reduce the risk.
Yeah, you mentioned, Chief, that you get involved in this kind of thing, and that aspect of the access and the driveway, that's one of the most important things. We talk about the home ignition zone around the house, but if you have difficult access, that's key. So I'm glad you brought that up. What does the local fire district do? We think of wildland fire, and we think of Oregon Department of Forestry, but obviously you are right at the urban interface, wildland urban interface in Mosier, and similar to Hood River County. You might just talk about what people can expect. You want to know who your local fire district people are, wherever you live, right? And how do you get involved in helping people with this?
So one of the things that we do, like I stated earlier, we have a good collaborative partnership between my district, the Forest Service, and the Oregon Department of Forestry. And we all work really well together of trying to get the message out. And along with that, there's also the Mid-Columbia Fire Prevention Co-op, which encompasses 2 counties, 2 states. So 2 counties in Washington and 3 in Oregon that work to push out the fire prevention message. And those are all collaborative efforts between local fire districts, state forestry, Forest Service, and we go out and we try to get to as many events as we can. And then here locally in the district, I mean, we try to get out, you know, push out the message, you know, when people call for burn permits. There's a lot of people going, can I just come down and get a permit? And I try to explain to them, if I go out and I take a look, I can see we're burning what you should be burning, but then I also have a chance to look to see, is your address visible? Can I get my apparatus down there? And sometimes it's not just whether or not I can get my apparatus in or out, but it's all my neighboring agencies, because we work so well with agencies within Wasco County, Hood River County, Klickitat, and Skamania counties. We need to make sure that everybody can get in and out and do it safely.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Mike. And please stick around for the panel, if you will, because we'll probably have more questions coming up. I think now I'm going to turn it over to Eric, talk a bit more about resources with Oregon Department of Forestry. So take it away, Eric.
Hey, everybody. My name's Eric Fennell with the Oregon Department of Forestry since 2008. And I'm new to the area. This is my third week in the job. And my title here in the Dalles is Community Wildfire Forester. So new to the position. Don't know if we'll be able to answer all the questions, but I can surely find out if that's the case. Let me share my screen here. Okay, so that's the end goal right there.
I'm not seeing your screen yet.
How
There
about
it
now?
goes. I see it now.
Okay. All right, that's the end goal. You know, Glenn showed some pictures of some good and some bad, and I'm just going to show pictures of good. So there you go. Trying to get to my next slide. There we go. Okay, so local agency support, and you know, we've talked, a lot of people have already talked about some of these, but of course, Oregon Department of Forestry here in the Dalles, our main office is out of the Dalles, and we service in our protection district, Hood River County and Wasco County. Nrcs too, Natural Resource Conservation Service, they have an office in Hood River and in Wasco County, and they're a resource for grant dollars. The Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area, managed by the Forest Service. So when you're looking at doing work, grant work, or possible work around your home, there could be some certain regulations that you need to work around if you live inside the scenic area. Of course, Mount Hood National Forest borders Hood River County, two different districts, the Zigzag District and the Barlow District. And then Mike is part of one of those local and rural fire departments. There's quite a few rural fire departments just in the Hood River Valley. And then, of course, Hood River County Emergency Management. And then there's also other ones on here like OSU Extension as well. So just like Mike talked about, visiting landowners, the Oregon Department of Forestry does the same thing here in the Dalles. Rick Fletcher, who Mike mentioned, he'll take courtesy calls, and he'll go out to your home and you know, talk about the defensible space that we've been talking about all night long, and give you tips and you know, more of a work site project specifications that you need to do to your home and your property to be safe. And just like Mike said, you know, not only are we talking about firefighting apparatus, but you know, getting to your property, there could be dozers, feller bunchers, anything to help stop a fire in your neighborhood. So we're talking big equipment may need to get up your driveway. So Rick would be looking at those same things as well. And as far too as water sources, you know, you may have a pond or a little stream in your backyard that we may not know about. And that's good for us to know, just in case if we're there at your property. In worst case scenario, we have that information to better help us protect your home and your neighbors. Grant opportunities. I know I've seen some questions in the comments. So the Oregon Department of Forestry and NRCS, we do have grant opportunities in Wasco County and in Hood River County. And being new to the job, that's my main job duties is I manage grant opportunities in both counties in collaboration with NRCS. So I come out, visit landowners that are interested, come up with management plans, appraisals, get landowners signed up and approved, and then work with them on finding contractors to do the work. And I've been here in 3 weeks and looking at the information here, in Wasco County specifically, the ODF, they've been doing grant work here on fuels reduction for probably over 20 years. And they've treated thousands and thousands of acres. So there's quite a bit of knowledge here and experience with that. All sorts of different types of machines, you see in the picture there, there's a brush hog masticator head like on a skid steer. There's also masticator heads on high tracked tiger cats, similar to like logging equipment. So, if the ground is gentle enough, a lot of this stuff can be done with equipment. If not, then we're talking hand crews to get the work done. But you can see they're on the right, pretty nice looking thin stand. And Glenn talked earlier about overstock stands and ladder fuels. A lot of this grant work that's being done is forest health. And with forest health comes fuels reduction as well. So it's a combination of forest health and fuel reduction on people's properties. And that goes down to people with 1 acre, half-acre lots, even up to landowners that have, hundreds of acres. So there's different grant opportunities for everyone out there. And then NRCS, they have a office in Hood River and in Wasco County. And currently I'm actually working on 3 NRCS grants on people's properties in south of Parkdale. So I know that there's funding out there right now, and we're doing similar work as shown in the pictures before, thinning out stands, getting rid of ladder fuels. So if fire is to come through, it runs on the surface and doesn't crown out and take out the whole stand. And this will PowerPoint will be shared with everybody. So a lot of these links you can click on in my presentation, and it'll show you this map, and you can zoom into different counties all over the state, and it'll tell you the funding and the grant types for the specific work in a specific area. So some online resources, and you're going to see, once you start snooping around on the web, you're going to see a lot of stuff that Glenn talked about, or the Firewise stuff that Mike talked about. You're going to see it on everybody's websites. The wildfire community is a complete and coordinated system, and that comes with online resources as well. So a lot of this stuff gets shared from agency to agency. So let's click on this real quick. So this is the ODF, Oregon Department of Forestry homepage. And right here, if you click on fire prevention, there's a lot of good information here. And the homeowners tab is where you would find a lot of this information that we've talked about today. There's Firewise stuff in here, community wildfire protection plans. Glenn had this out here earlier. It's the Oregon Wildfire Risk Explorer. And I've got it clicked on, we'll see if it opens up. I wanted to show it to everybody. So there's a link here for homeowners. And there's the map of Oregon, and we'll zoom into Hood River down here. And there is a tutorial on this, so if you get into it and you want to learn how to use it yourself, there is a tutorial here that you can click and it'll show you how to use the layers and do the reports. So here it actually has, you can see here, hazard to potential structures. So red is very high, high down to non-burnable. If I turn that off, it's got the base layer so you can zoom in. There's Hood River, and we'll head south and we'll just pick an area down here. Let's look at this home right here, this area, and we'll turn the hazard back on. And you can see it's saying low hazard, but just to the southeast is some high hazard. It's got burn probability sections in here. And then another good tool is if you can find your house in here, or you can put in your address. You click on a specific area and then you can run a report. It's thinking here. Homeowner report, click on that and it'll download. So it'll give a report of your home, and it talks about burn probability, size of the flame lengths, hazards to your potential structures. And then one good thing here too is here on the right side, it shows you all the information, like what rural fire department district you're part of, if you're in a rangeland protection association. So a lot of good information there. Firewise sites. And then again, you're going to see this picture in pretty much any publications about defensible space. So that's a good resource. And then of course, we've seen some National Fire Protection Association stuff, and that's the Firewise stuff that we've already seen before. So that's a good, another good website to check out as well. And then here's the online resource for the Hood River County Sheriff's Office for the emergency management. And there's actually, each county has a community wildfire protection plan. And Hood River County's, it was originally written in 2006. Wasco County's is about the same age as well. And right now it is being looked at, and they're revamping it as we speak. But, you know, it's a 150-page document, and it talks pretty much about fire in the whole district. So what kind of equipment the rural fire departments have. It talks about address markers, like Mike was talking about, how maybe some areas don't have those and they need to improve that. So it's just a comprehensive report on the whole county of current wildfire and plans and procedures that can be put in place to make things better. And like I said, this is going on 15 years old, but I read that it's being revamped right now. Same with Wasco County. So a lot of good information there. It's a pretty long read, but pretty in depth. And then just all those same agencies I talked about earlier, I have all those here as well. That's all I have. I just say get on the internet and start snooping around, and you'll find a lot of information. There's it can be overwhelming how much information is out there on this stuff.
Well, thanks, Eric. And hopefully we've kind of pointed to the things that you might want to find on the internet, so you're not swimming upstream too much, because you're zeroing in on the things that, that we've highlighted here that are important. And usually you'll find it one way or the other, because everybody cross-references these, but definitely want you to know your local connections, which Eric has done a great job of just laying them all out. And so we will be sending that to you. I'm going to send you pretty much all these links in an email so you can click on them. And then we're also going to build a little web page and post these presentations and the recording of this presentation. It'll take us probably till next week to build that site and get all the stuff on it. But I can get all the links out to you by emails. So now I guess, why don't you go ahead? Yeah, we stopped sharing, and let's just deal with a lot of these questions. And we'll just do as much as we can. We got a little more time here, and actually, if, folks are willing to hang around and we keep going, we might go a little overtime. So, what you just talked about, Eric, you talked about a number of grant opportunities, and there's some questions here about exactly, how do people get linked with those? What's available? And I would assume, Eric, they really just need to call either you at ODF or the Nrcs, which are kind of the two points of contact about the fuels reduction grants anyway. Is that right?
Yeah, so for Wasco County and Hood River County, the main big players are the Oregon Department of Forestry and the Nrcs. So if you call each office, we're dealing with that. This is my job, so I'm dealing with grants every single day. So and we have multiple grants, and we're always putting in for new grants and thinking about areas that need work. And as the department, there's only so much grant work to go around, so we're working collaboratively with the John Day District unit and the Prineville unit to come up with the best plan for the grants that we're competing against other agencies in other states. So yeah, if you just call Oregon Department of Forestry or NRCS, talk to them about where your property is and what you're looking to do, somebody will get you pointed in the right direction. And a lot of these grants, they're pretty elusive grants. Some of the grants as much as 90% cost share. So you're looking at maybe only putting 10% out of your pocket to help out with the project. So these are well worth projects to explore.
And part of what we're talking about, there's a lot you can do yourself to start making your own assessment and shape up your plan. And they can help you with the plan, but you can do a lot of that yourself. And as Eric said, they're applying for new monies all the time. And frankly, with the amount of fire disasters we've had, there's an increase in escalation in the funding opportunities coming. So the more you start looking at things and prioritizing what you want to get done, and you have a plan to get it done, and then you look for these opportunities. And it's, this is a longer term process. So if it's not this year, it might be next year or the year after. 5 years later, you need to do some of it again. So just kind of getting in the mode and then looking for these opportunities, and they'll keep coming, and they'll probably be coming in higher numbers due to the increased needs that we have.
One more thing, Glenn.
Go ahead.
I would say, there's a limited amount of money, and some of these, the way we grants, I guess, is there's a competitive process on some of this stuff. So maybe the first year you don't get it, but typically we put your name and your property on a wait list. And when something comes available, we reach out. So we just don't forget about you. We remember.
Very good. Someone else was asking, how can they get help? How can they get somebody that could come to their property and help them with some of this assessment and planning? And, there's multiple ways, but Eric, it's part of your job to do that, right?
Correct. Yep. The person that was in my job last was only doing it part-time. So I'm full-time now. So that is part of my job, between myself and Rick Fletcher, who's also here on the district that does some of that work. If you just call, yeah, we can come out, do courtesy visits, and try to get you guys on the right track.
And in many cases, you should get to know your local fire district office and fire chief. Sometimes they have programs and ramp them up, especially in more, higher density areas that aren't so much in the wildland. So that, that's another place to look. And also OSU Extension, we get involved and help out as well. So, excuse me, I want to go back to the chat here. And there were a lot of basic questions about, who's out there that can do the fuels reduction work, or how do people, get those masticator machines, or learn about either contractors or ways to get some of the equipment, and what's available out there. Do you have lists of contractors, or do you help connect people with contractors who can do that kind of work?
Yeah, we do. So if you don't go through a grant and you want to get the work done, right up here, I got a contractor list for hand crews, so hand labor. We're just talking people with chainsaws or equipment. So if I got a 3-page document that's got contractors for Wasco County, Hood River County, and a lot of that labor comes over from Washington as well. So yep, we do have a list, and if you give me a call, I can get that to everybody. And if it's something we want to add, Glenn, we can do that too.
Okay, yeah, I think we'll try to add that to the list, and we try to keep that up to date, the list of contractors. And there's one thing that we hope there'll be more. Infrastructure and the availability of contractors and workers is always somewhat of a challenge, but I think there's some increase due to the demand for the work. So we'll hope to see more climbing on that list as well over time. There's a question about the wildfire bill, Senate Bill 762. Is anybody informed about that, to talk about what the implications of that are? I guess I'm not hearing anyone volunteering about that, so I wouldn't speak to that at the moment, but you can certainly go online and look up by bill number, and you'll get a description of that, and you'll probably find a lot of notes about the discussion. There's been so many different wildfire bills that I don't have that on the top of my head as to which one that is. There's certainly been a lot of important legislation and appropriations and funding to the Oregon Department of Forestry and others that really are ramping up fire suppression and fire response capability, are ramping up post-fire recovery. For instance, I'm working on a group that's helping people with reforestation after wildfire. We estimate maybe 100 million trees need to be planted for those landowners that want to, on private lands on the fires that happened last year. And, it's going to take years to get that many seedlings and get that done. The state actually came up with around $5 million, I think, to Department of Forestry to help with that. So there's a lot of different bills that are affecting that. I'm sure there's also one under consideration about really focusing more on wildland urban interface, and like the old Senate Bill 360 that has certain counties where landowners are required to do more defensible space in ignition zone work. And that might start being applied to more counties statewide. So there's probably a lot of things coming down the pipe there. If there was a question about, chips, when you talk about the area, particularly within 5 feet of the house where you really want to keep it, non-flammable, and wood chips are not a good idea right next to structures. They're not bad out in further out into the landscape, but just on trails and such. But as far as what's right next to buildings, you don't want wood chips or other flammable things. You'd rather have, either non-flammable or clean and green or kept moist. There was a question about, in general, fire-resistant plants, and there's a couple of different good publications on fire-resistant landscape plants when you're trying to make those choices. So I'll post some of those in the resources that we send you. OSU Extension has a couple of guides for fire-resistant plants for the home landscape. Someone asked, are roof sprinklers a good idea? And maybe Mike, Chief Renault, can you address the idea of roof sprinklers as something that people might or might not want to do?
Sure. So when we're looking at roof sprinklers, even some of the stuff that we look at, roof sprinklers, if you think about what the roof does, it just causes everything to shed away. So really, if you're going to do like sprinklers or put up sprinklers, you'd be better off putting them at that 5-foot zone. So it's like spraying away from the house. So it's actually cooling and causing the humidity going up. Putting it on the roof doesn't necessarily give a whole lot of benefit. I mean, even for us, sometimes when we're doing structural protection, we might be more apt to plug up all your downspouts and fill up all your gutters with water. So that way, if the embers go up into where the gutters are, it actually has a better chance of being put out versus trying to put sprinklers up on roofs.
Kind of related to that, what about fire retardants or coatings or things that you put on your deck that would make them less flammable, or using just even replacing the deck, with Trex? What about things that you can treat your wood with to make it less flammable? Are any of those effective or recommended?
I can't necessarily speak to that because I know that there's just so many different things in the market right now that people use, what they'll spray like on their landscape or on their decks and stuff like that. And I know looking at some people are talking about changing out from like a wood deck to like the Terex deck or something like that. The big key about decks and stuff is just to make sure that there's no litter debris underneath of it. And it's actually like fenced off or cordoned off with like sheet or with wire mesh. So that way the brands won't get up underneath the deck and cause a fire from there, from a ember wash or an ember storm from the fire coming. Whether or not you change out your deck, that's, I think that's kind of a homeowner's decision if they want to do that. Honestly, I think everything, as long as you keep the debris out and, and keep it clean, shouldn't have any issues whether you went with just a normal deck or with the Terex.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, some of the home assessment checklists really go into great detail about all the different aspects of the home construction, the materials and measures that you can take to reduce vulnerability. What you mentioned about sprinklers on the roof, if your roof is a non-flammable roof, either a metal roof or a composition shingle roof, the studies have shown that those are really good at resisting fire. It's the what's in the gutters is more important if there's accumulation of flammable material in the rain gutters, or again, what's right next to the home or under the deck. And that kind of leads to that question, when we're cleaning up all the debris, someone asks, well, how do you handle all that leaf and needle litter and debris? And of course, you just have to be, diligent with seasonal raking and sweeping or blowing, and then you either put it in piles. Anytime you make a pile and concentrate it and then have it separated, that's a lot better than having it, a pile away from your home and out in a safe place for a pile to sit. That concentrates the fuel and also says higher moisture, as opposed to having it scattered and spread where fire can move through it. Of course, a lot of folks will burn piles in the safe season, and hopefully increasing, community debris disposal. Most communities these days, if you fill a truckload with your needles and woody debris, they're fairly inexpensive dump. Neighborhood sites for dumping is something that, like the Firewise communities, when they set up a neighborhood dump day, and really everybody work together and set up a place with a chipper or a disposal site, so you can kind of team up on that and reduce costs. And with that, let's see if there's somebody else asked about prescribed burns. And that was, again, if you're using fire to reduce your fuels under safe conditions, that's something that people are doing in the right conditions. And it's not something I don't think we've seen a lot in Hood River County. Probably, in drier areas that don't have a lot of fuel, you can start to employ prescribed burns. We're looking at doing that more around the state, training people to do that and making it easier for people to get a burn crew and do a prescribed burn, but that's still pretty limited, but something that's up and coming as a fuels reduction method. Trying to look for other questions here. In general, there was a question, is Firewise being encouraged? As you saw from Mike's presentation, there's a process. It really just starts with someone taking leadership and then knock on the door with Department of Forestry. and they'll help you and encourage you, but you really have to get yourself and some of your neighbors to reach that critical mass to agree to do it at the community level, at least, 8 people, cooperating is my understanding. But once they do that, Eric, who at ODF works with folks on Firewise, helping with those applications?
That's a question that I'd have to get back to you on. I just know that we only have that one Firewise Paradise Ridge, and I've been involved or been spoken to about it yet. So
Yeah, I would guess it might be on your plate, but it does. Usually you team up with your local fire district, like with Chief Renault there and Mosier, and also with an ODF person. And I'm sure there's somebody in your office are probably out fighting fires right now, if it's not you, Eric. But
yeah, I know Rick Fletcher, he's down at Lakeview right now. He's a permanent forest officer, and he worked with Mike on the Paradise Ridge fire. So yeah, I didn't get to talk to him before he left.
Hey, Glenn.
Amanda, go ahead.
Yeah, so if they go to the Firewise USA website and get all of the information, the Oregon, the ODF person is Jenna Trentadue, who takes care of all those. So they'll probably be connected, likely with somebody more local, but on the state level, Jenna does that. But if they get into the website and start doing some exploration, they'll get there.
Yeah, I know Jenna's at the state level, and then she probably helps connect you with the right local person.
Exactly.
And you keep in mind that a lot of our Department of Forestry personnel are firefighters. And so this time of year, it's hard to get anybody from ODF. And that's a good point to make, is that it's important to do a lot of this work when it's not fire season. During fire season, of course, a lot of these resources for assistance are busy with fire fighting. There's another question about biochar. So one of the methods for disposing of debris is to put it in a particular kind of burner, like a metal box or a more sophisticated burner that doesn't completely consume it and turns it into charcoal biochar, and then that can go back into the soil as an amendment. It actually not only does it, it's really good for the soil. It's a good soil amendment, and it also stores the carbon in terms of like carbon sequestration. That's up and coming. It's not a real large scale solution, but it's certainly a possible solution for controlled burning, basically making a lot of biochar out of, instead of burning a pile to complete ash, you partially consume it, turn it into charcoal, and put it back into the earth. And they make boxes for doing that out at small scale, and we're seeing an increasing number of demonstrations, and I think that capacity will be ramped up soon. You might even have larger scale burn boxes at more community level, coming as one of the tools in the toolbox. So let's see, are there any other questions that we haven't hit right now? Just looking through the chat. Amanda, do you see any others that we haven't talked about?
Well, I did just get a direct message with a link, and I'll put it in the chat for some information on the SB 762 wildfire bill. And then there were also some questions about mastication and masticators, where there might be some available in the area, and also if ODF has a list of resources for fire fuels reduction, including maybe masticators. I think that was touched on a little bit, but not masticators specifically.
Yeah, I think that's going to be part of that list of contractors and resources that Eric and I were talking about. And we're trying to actually grow that list. There's an increasing number of contractors that are getting these little masticator machines, or big ones. They come in different sizes. So you saw in the slide, I think that Eric showed some of these small skid steer type machines that are more like a 6 to 8 foot wide machine. And that goes all the way up to a huge track hoe with a giant masticator that can take down a 30-foot tall tree. And those kinds of equipment are increasingly becoming more available because there's an increasing need for that. So we do have a list of that, and it'll probably be a growing list, and stay tuned. I just talked to a contractor over here on the west side in Clackamas and Marion County. We had the worst ice storm that I have seen in my career, and dumped huge amounts of debris, which I know you've seen before in Hood River. But we had a really widespread event from Salem to Portland on both sides of the valley, and huge amounts of debris. And the contractors are ramping up more with that kind of a masticator type equipment that helps, turn that stuff into chips out in the field, as opposed to you having to feed a chipper by hand, which is obviously another way to do it. Well, with that,
Questions?
yeah, I think, we're about the end of time that we had in mind. I really appreciate all the speakers for helping us out, and thanks everyone for showing up. And just look for an email from me, and then when we get the web page set up with more resources, you'll get another one with that link. But we'll send you pretty much everything that we talked about and the links that we can extract from those. So I guess with that, just again, thanks again.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
This is Ninian Blackburn from the Upper Hood River Valley. I was struck by the fact that I did not hear mention of climate change once in any presentation. And that's probably because you guys are aware and working towards the increased fire emergency situation. But I wanted to ask whether there are in place plans to address what is obviously going to be a much more severe fire season each year as we progress outwards, and whether there are resources available from, for example, the infrastructure bill that is going through Congress that might be applicable to the county.
Yeah, good question. It's interesting. I usually do have that as part of what I talk about. It's so much ingrained in what we're looking at with the increasing risk of the longer fire seasons. The weather is a key driver, but yeah, that certainly is part of what we're looking at. Part of the reason we're ramping up our attention to this is that not only is the fire, the infrequent fire, but catastrophic fire a bigger concern, and especially in the more productive forests with more fuels, but certainly with climate change and just what I've seen in the last 20 years, longer dry periods where those forests are more likely to burn, that increases the likelihood of fire being able to spread under those conditions. So that's really a kind of an underlying factor that is really a big part of our ramping up. And as far as addressing that, we're looking at predicting what fire seasons look like and preparing for that. And that's one of the reasons that we're just trying to focus more attention on what you can do to change fire behavior, given that it probably will be coming more often in higher risk levels, with some of those longer, drier summer and conditions. One of the things related to that, to climate change, is there's not a really good handle on sort of the local weather, which is the outcome of, climate is the average weather over a long period, and the local conditions, such as those dry east winds. I haven't seen real good predictions of how those east winds, which are the major driver of our bigger fires, haven't seen real good predictions of what climate change might do to the frequency or the way those winds occur. So that's kind of a wild card. That's, that's obviously local weather meteorology, taking climate and downscaling to predict what the gorge wind is going to do is not something that we really have a good handle on, which just means we've got to be all the more ready for the unpredictability. So I hope that helped address some of that, your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think I probably let everybody go here. Thanks for that last question. And we're here for you. You'll have my contact, of course, as part of what you get in the email. And let's keep working on this together. So thanks, everybody. Good night. So much to our speakers. Thank you.